So how did we go about changing the culture of the JIRA team to make this happen? Initially, JIRA had no QA. The devs were doing all of their own testing. However, they didn't really know anything about good testing techniques such as exploratory testing. They focused entirely on writing automation. Now, don't get me wrong, automation is critically important for regression testing. It's still a very, very strong part of our quality puzzle. But automation only really tells you whether your code is functionally correct for the scenarios that you think to code for. So it doesn't tell you about security, perceived performance, usability, concurrency, robustness, or any other aspect of quality that can't be defined in a checklist. So the first thing that we needed to do was to show them that there was more to quality than just automation. So we started by pitching in alongside the devs and doing hands-on exploratory testing. And we quickly proved to them that exploratory testing could catch whole classes of issues that automation could not. Now, after countless occasions where we saved the devs bacon because they were about to ship horrible bugs and we caught them, we found that we had their attention and respect. They started realizing that, yes, we do actually know what we're talking about when we say we're testing experts. So having proven the value of exploratory testing to the devs, we then started to break down this line and ask devs to start trying it too. We did this by establishing what we call dotting, or developer on testing. So the devs would take turns to do exploratory testing of each other's work. Now, as they were still new at this, QA would still take the highest risk stories to test. And we would also do some release level testing to look for issues that the dots had missed. What we found was we were still finding way too many issues in our release level testing stage. It was clear to us that the dots really didn't know how to do exploratory testing well, and far too many issues were slipping through dotting. And so in the spirit of experimentation, we tried something different. We said, okay, from now on, we're going to really invest in dotting. Now dots will test every story, and we will spend our time giving you more guidance on how to do it well. So at this stage, we introduced what we called QA demos. That is, a quick pairing session between the dev and the tester after implementation is finished. So the dev and the QA discuss the feature, they talk about the implementation, they talk about the risks, they have a look at the code, and they talk about the testing that the dev's already done. This is not a testing session, it's only a 15 or 30-minute discussion. But based on this discussion, the QA has a pretty good idea of what testing they would do if they were going to test it themselves. They have an idea what the risks are, they have an idea what the trouble points might be. But instead of doing the testing themselves, they write testing notes, which is advice for the dot on what they should consider when they're doing their exploratory testing. Now, the critical thing about testing notes is that they're not checklists and they're not scripted tests, because both of these serve to limit exploration and critical thinking. Instead, these are open questions, prompts and hints, tips to get the dot thinking critically and exploring, rather than looking to us to do their thinking for them. And we found that once we had these testing notes in place, the quality of dotting rose dramatically. And in fact, after 6 months passed without us finding any issues in release level testing, we dropped the release level testing safety net completely. It was pretty much just a waste of time. So now we had the quality consistently higher. So we started looking at improving speed. At this point, we still had a rejection rate of roughly 30% for stories. And as we looked into that, we found that we could very often predict a rejection before the feature was even written. So for example, we'd know that a particular developer would never bother testing session timeouts. We'd mention that in the testing notes, the dot would test it and reject it because session timeouts weren't handled. As we sat back and had a look at that, we realized it was ridiculous. We were giving the advice to the wrong person. So we started pairing with the devs before they started their work, giving this information about risks and testing advice to them rather than to the dot. We called these QA kickoffs, and we now do them before every story is started. This way, many of the bugs were never even implemented in the first place, and the rejection rate halved to 15% just from QA kickoffs alone. So that was pretty good. We were pretty happy with that. But remember that we've still got this long-term goal of teaching the devs to do this critical thinking themselves and to not need us. So after a while, our devs got into the habit of doing kickoffs with QA. They started anticipating what we were going to ask. They started getting bored. And that's fantastic. Once we notice that a dev is getting to that point, we say, great, now we'd like you to do your own kickoffs by yourself, write up your own initial testing notes, the results of that kickoff, and we'll review it and add anything you missed. So that way the dev has more ownership over their quality mindset and over the quality of the feature. But we're still there to protect our customers if the dev is still learning or has a mental blank. Now at this point we did some more analysis and found that the very presence of the dotting safety net was causing bugs further upstream. So the devs were very good at dotting each other's features, but when they're testing their own features, they were getting slack because they subconsciously knew that a dot was going to test it after them and catch whatever they'd missed. And so dotting, which was a tool that originally helped us build this quality mindset, was now holding the team back from progressing further. And so very carefully in selected teams, we started removing dotting completely. Now bear in mind, there's still many unofficial points where a story can be rejected after it's marked done, so our rejection rates are still valid. But as far as the dev is concerned, they are the only person responsible for testing their feature, and they are the only person who sees the code before it goes to production. And so that's our current standard process in JIRA QA. All testing's done by the dev who implemented the feature, with advice and guidance from QA before and after implementation. And each dev holds full responsibility for the quality of what they write, all the way to production. Now please note that this is the current process. I don't label this as the final process. We're not done, and I don't think we'll ever be done. This is a snapshot of a process that's constantly evolving, constantly